Okay, hello ladies and gentlemen, Forrest over here, and welcome back to another reading live stream. Tonight I will be continuing to read Stephen King's Night Shift. So yeah, basically if you couldn't tell by now, I'm doing a back and forth shift between reading Night Shift and Psycho, so that way it kind of balances itself out with that. But anyway, for tonight I'll be reading two stories. The first story, I'll be reading two stories for tonight. They are Battleground and Trucks. Yes, that is exactly what you think it is. But because my glasses are a little bit messed up, these stories tonight without my glasses, but I can still, to a degree, see the chat even without my glasses on. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get right straight into it. But please note, because I think people should probably know this, even though I sometimes neglect to bring this up, um, there will be times where I will be reading the book when people come by and say something. If you feel like I'm ignoring you, that is not my intention. It is simply that I am reading the book. But I will look up from time to time to see if there was anything from the chat. With that said, let's get tonight's reading stream started with the short story Battleground. Mr. Renshaw? The desk clerk's voice caught him halfway to the elevator, and Renshaw turned back impatiently, shifting his plate bag from one hand to the other. The envelope in his coat pocket, stuffed with 20s and 50s, crackled heavily. The job had gone well and the pay had been excellent, even after the organization's 15% finder's fee had been skimmed off the top. Now all he wanted was a hot shower and a gin and tonic and sleep. What is it? Package, sir. Would you sign the slip? Renshaw signed and looked thoughtfully at the rectangular package. His name and the building's address were written on the gummed label in a spiky backhand script that seemed familiar. He rocked the package on the imitation marble surface of the desk, and something clanged faintly inside. Should I have that sent up, Mr. Rimshaw? No, I've got it. It was about 18 inches on a side, and fitted clumsily under his arm. He put it on the plush carpet that covered the elevator floor, and twisted his key in the penthouse slot above the regular rack of buttons. The car rose smoothly and silently. He closed his eyes and let the job replay itself on the dark screen of his mind. First, as always, a call from Cal Bates. You available, Johnny? He was available twice a year. Minimum fee $10,000. He was very good, very reliable, but what his customers really paid for was the infallible predator's talent. John Renshaw was a human hawk, constructed by both genetics and environment to do two things superbly: kill and survive. After Bates's call, a buff-colored envelope appeared in Renshaw's box. A name, an address, a photograph, all committed to memory, then down the garbage disposal with the ashes of envelope and contents. This time the face that had been that of a sallow Miami businessman named Hollins Morris, founder and owner of the Morris Toy Company. Someone had wanted Morris out of the way and had gone to the organization. The organization, in the person of Calvin Bates, had talked to John Renshaw. Pow! Mourners, please omit flowers. The door slid open. He picked up his package and stepped out. He unlocked the suite and stepped in. At this time of day, just after 3 p.m., the spacious living room was splashed with April sunshine. He paused for a moment, enjoying it, and put the package on the end of the table by the door and loosened his tie. He dropped the envelope on top of it and walked over to the terrace. He pushed open the sliding glass door and stepped out. It was cold and the wind knifed through his thin topcoat. Yet he paused a moment, looking over the city the way a general might survey a captured country. Traffic crawled beetle-like in the streets. Far away, almost buried in the golden afternoon haze, the Bay Bridge glittered like a madman's mirage. To the east, all but lost behind the downtown high-rises, the crammed and dirty tenements with their stainless steel forests of TV aerials. It was better up here, better than in the gutters. He went back inside, slid the door closed, and went into the bathroom for a long, hot shower. When he sat down 40 minutes later to regard his package, drink in hand, the shadows had marched halfway across the wine-colored carpet, and the best of the afternoon was past. It was a bomb. Of course it wasn't, but one proceeded as if it were. That was why one had remained upright and taken nourishment while so many others had gone to that great unemployment office in the sky. If it was a bomb, it was clockless. It sat utterly silent, bland, and enigmatic. Plastique was more likely these days, anyway. Less temperamental than the clock springs manufactured by West Clocks and Big Ben. Renshaw looked at the postmark. Miami, April 15th. 5 days ago. So the bomb was not time set. It would have gone off in the hotel safe in that case. Miami. Yes. And that spiky backhand writing. There had been a framed photograph on the sallow businessman's desk. The photo had been of an even sallower old crone wearing a babushka. The script slanted across the bottom had read, Best from your number one idea girl, Mom. What kind of a number one idea is this, Mom? A do-it-yourself extermination kit? He regarded the package with complete concentration, not moving, his arms folded. Extraneous questions, such as how Morris's number one idea girl might have discovered his address, did not occur to him. They were for later, for Cal Bates. Unimportant now. Okay then, my glasses just fell out of my foot. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Alright. With a sudden, almost absent move, he took a small celluloid calendar out of his wallet and inserted it deftly under the twine that crisscrossed the brown paper. He slid it under the scotch tape that held one end flap. The flap came loose, relaxing against the twine. He paused for a time, observing, then leaned close and sniffed. Cardboard, paper, string. Nothing more. He walked around the box, squatted easily on his haunches, and repeated the process. Twilight was invading his apartment with gray, shadowy fingers. One of the flaps popped free of the restraining twine, showing a dull green box beneath. Metal. Hinged. He produced a pocket knife and cut the twine. It fell away, and a few helping pods with the tip of the knife revealed the box. It was green with black markings, and stenciled on the front in white letters were the words G.I. Joe, Vietnam Footlocker. Below that, 20 infantrymen, 10 helicopters, 2 barmen, 2 bazooka men, 2 medics, 4 jeeps. Below that, a flag decal. Below that, in the corner, Morris Toy Company, Miami, Florida. He reached out to touch it, then withdrew his hand. Something inside the footlocker had moved. gonna annoy the heck out of me with how this is doing this. Renshaw stood up, not hurrying, and backed across the room toward the kitchen and the hall. He snapped on the lights. The Vietnam footlocker was rocking, making the brown paper beneath it rattle. It suddenly overbalanced and fell to the carpet with a soft thud, landing on one end. The hinged top opened a crack of perhaps 2 inches. Tiny foot soldiers almost an inch and a half tall began to crawl out. Renshaw watched them, unblinking. His mind made no effort to cope with the real or unreal aspect of what he was seeing, only with the possible consequences for his survival. The soldiers were wearing minuscule army fatigues, helmets, and field packs. Tiny carbines were slung across their shoulders. Two of them looked briefly across the room at Renshaw. Their eyes, no bigger than pencil points, glittered. 5, 10, 12, in all 20. One of them was gesturing, ordering the others. They lined themselves up along the crack that the fall had produced and began to push. The crack began to widen. Renshaw picked one of their large pillows off the couch and began to walk toward them. The commanding officer turned and gestured. The others the others whirled and unslung their carbines. There were tiny, almost delicate popping sounds, and Renshaw felt suddenly as if he had been stung by bees. He threw the pillow. Oh, wait, hold on a second. There we go. He threw the pillow. It struck them, knocking them sprawling, then hit the box and knocked it wide open. Insect-like, with a faint, high whirring noise like chiggers, a cloud of miniature helicopters painted jungle green rose out of the box. Tiny, tiny foot sounds, tiny foot sounds reached Renshaw's ears, and he saw pinprick-sized muzzle flashes coming from the open copter doors. Needles pricked his belly, his right arm, the side of his neck. He clawed out and got one. Sudden pain in his fingers. Blood welling. The whirling blades had chopped him to the bone in diagonal scarlet hash marks. The others whirled out of range, circling him like horseflies. The stricken copter thumped to the rug and lay still. Sudden excruciating pain in his foot made him cry out. One of the foot soldiers was standing on his shoe and bayoneting his ankle. The tiny face looked up, panting and grinning. Renshaw kicked at it, and the tiny body flew across the room to splatter on the wall. It did not leave blood, but a viscid purple smear. There was a tiny coughing explosion and blinding agony ripped his thigh. One of the bazooka men had come out of the footlocker. A small curl of smoke rose lazily from his weapon. Renshaw looked down at his leg and saw a blackened, smoking hole in his pants the size of a quarter. The flesh beneath was charred. The little bastard shot me! He turned and ran into the hall, then into his bedroom. One of the helicopters buzzed past his cheek, blades whirring busily. The small stutter of a bar. Then it darted away. The gun beneath his pillow was a 44 Magnum, big enough to put a hole the size of two fists through anything it hit. Renshaw turned, holding the pistol in both hands. He realized coolly that he would be shooting at a moving target not much bigger than a flying light bulb. Two of the copters whirled in. Two of the copters whirred in. Sitting on the bed, Renshaw fired once. One of the helicopters exploded into nothingness. That's two, he thought. He drew a bead on the second, squeezed the trigger. It jigged. God damn it, it jigged! The helicopter swooped at him in a sudden deadly arc, fore and aft overhead props whirring with blinding speed. Renshaw caught a glimpse of one of the barmen crouched at the open bay door, firing his weapon in short, deadly bursts, and then he threw himself to the floor and rolled. My eyes! The bastard was going for my eyes! He came up on his back at the far wall, the gun held at chest level, but the copter was retreating. It seemed to pause for a moment. and tip in recognition of Renshaw's superior firepower. Then it was gone, back toward the living room. Renshaw got up, wincing as his weight came down on the wounded leg. It was bleeding freely. And why not? He thought grimly. It's not everybody who gets hit point blank with a bazooka shell and lives to tell about it. So Mom was his number one idea girl, was she? She was all that and a bit more. He shook a pillowcase free of the tick and ripped it into a bandage for his leg, then took his shaving mirror from the bureau and went to the hallway door. Kneeling, he shoved it out onto the carpet at an angle and peered in. They were bio, bivouacking by the footlocker, damned if they weren't. Miniature soldiers ran hither and thither, setting up tents. Jeeps 2 inches high raced about importantly. A medic was working over the soldier Renshaw had kicked. The remaining 8 copters flew in a protective swarm overhead, at coffee table level. Suddenly they became aware of the mirror, and 3 of the foot soldiers dropped to one knee and began firing. Seconds later the mirror shattered in 4 pieces. 4 places. Okay then. Renshaw went back to the bureau and got the heavy mahogany odds and ends box. Linda had given him for Christmas. He hefted it once, nodded, and went to the doorway and lunged through. He wound up and fired like a pitcher throwing a fastball. The box described a swift true vector and smashed little men like nine pins. One of the jeeps rolled over twice. Renshaw advanced to the doorway of the living room, sighted on one of the sprawling soldiers, and gave it to him. Several of the others had recovered. Some were kneeling and firing formally. Others had taken cover. Still others had retreated back into the footlocker. The bee stings began to pepper his legs and torso, but none reached higher than his rib cage. Perhaps the range was too great. It didn't matter. He had no intention of being turned away. This was it. He missed with his next shot. They were so goddamn small, but the following one sent another soldier into a broken sprawl. The copters were buzzing toward him ferociously. Now the tiny bullets began to splat into his face, above and below his eyes. He potted the lead copter, then the second. Jagged streaks of pain slivered in his vision. The remaining 6 split into 2 retreating wings. His face was wet with blood and he swiped at it with his forearm. He was ready to start firing again when he paused. The soldiers who had retreated inside the footlocker were trundling something out. Something that looked like... There was a blinding sizzle of yellow fire, and a sudden bout of wood and plaster exploded from the wall to his left. A rocket launcher! He squeezed off one shot at it, missed, wheeled, and ran for the bathroom at the far end of the corridor. He slammed the door and locked it. In the bathroom mirror, an Indian was staring back at him with dazed and haunted eyes. A battle-crazed Indian with thin streamers of red paint drawn from holes no bigger than grains of pepper. A ragged flap of skin dangled from one cheek. There was there was a gouged furrow in his neck. I'm losing. Hold up a second. Oh, I thought there was something there. Sorry. I thought something was up, that one countdown was on my screen. That's why I was stopped for a second. It's all good for now. He ran a shaking hand through his hair. The front door was cut off. So was the phone and the kitchen extension. They had a goddamn rocket launcher and a direct hit would tear his head off. Damn it! That wasn't even listed on the box! He started to draw in a long breath and let it out in a sudden grunt as a fist-sized section of the door blew in with a charred burst of wood. Tiny flames glowed briefly around the ragged edges of the hole, and he saw the brilliant flash as they launched another round. More wood blew inward, scattering burning slivers on the bathroom rug. He stamped them out, and two of the copters buzzed angrily through the hole. Minuscule bar slugs stitched his chest. With a whining groan of rage, he smashed out of the air barehanded, sustaining a picket fence of deep slashes across his palm. In sudden desperate invention, he slung a heavy bath towel over the other. It fell, writhing, to the floor, and he stamped the life out of it. His breath was coming in hoarse whoops. Blood ran into one eye, hot and stinging, and he wiped it away. There, God damn it! There. That'll make them think. Indeed, it did seem to be making them think. There was no movement for 15 minutes. Renshaw sat on the edge of the tub, thinking feverishly. There had to be a way out of this blind alley. There had to be, if there was only a way to flank them. He suddenly turned and looked at the small window over the tub. There was a way. Of course there was. His eyes dropped to the can of lighter fluid on top of the medicine cabinet. He was reaching for it when the rustling noise came. He whirled, bringing the magnum up, but it was only a tiny scrap of paper shoved under the crack of the door. The crack, Renshaw noted grimly, was too narrow for even one of them to get through. There was one tiny word written on the paper. Surrender. Renshaw smiled grimly and put the lighter fluid in his breast pocket. There was a chewed stub of pencil beside it. He scrawled one word on the paper and shoved it back under the door. The word was nuts. There was a sudden blinding barrage of rocket shells and Renshaw backed away. They arched through the hole in the door and detonated against the pale blue tiles above the towel rack, turning the elegant wall into a pocket thriller landscape. Renshaw threw a hand over his eyes as plaster flew in, a hot rain of shrapnel. Burning holes ripped through his shirt, and his back was prepared. When the barrage stopped, Renshaw moved. He climbed on top of the tub and slid the window open. Cold stars looked in at him. It was a narrow window and a narrow ledge beyond it, but there was no time to think of that. He boosted himself through and the cold air slapped his lacerated face and neck like an open hand. He was leaning over the balanced point of his hands, staring straight down. 40 stories down. From this height the street looked no wider than a child's train track. The bright, winking lights of the city glittered madly below him like thrown jewels. With the deceptive ease of a trained gymnast, Renshaw brought his knees up to rest on the lower edge of the window. If one of those was wasp-sized copters flew through that hole in the door now, one shot in the ass would send him straight down, screaming all the way. None did. He twisted first one leg out and reached one hand, grabbed and one reaching hand grabbed the overhead cornice and held. A moment later he was standing on the edge outside the window. Deliberately not thinking of the horrifying drop below his heels, not thinking of what would happen if one of the helicopters buzzed out after him, Renshaw edged toward the corner of the building. 15 feet. 10. There. He paused, his chest pressed against the wall, hands splayed out on the rough surface. He could feel the lighter fluid in his breast pocket and the reassuring weight of the magnum jammed in his waistband. Now to get around the goddamn corner. Gently he eased one foot around and slid his weight onto it. Now the right ankle was pressed razor-like into his chest and gut. There was a smear of burnt guano in front of his eyes on the rough stone. Christ, he thought crazily. I didn't know they could fly this high. His left foot slipped. For a weird, timeless moment, he tottered over the brink, right arm back watering madly for balance, and then he was clutching the two sides of the building in a lover's embrace, face pressed against the hard corner, breath shuddering in and out of his lungs. A bit at a time, he slid the other foot around. 30 feet away, his own living room terrace just jutted out. He made his way down to it, breath sliding in and out of his lungs with shallow force. Twice he was forced to stop as sharp gusts of wind tried to pick him off the ledge. Then he was there, gripping the ornamented iron railings. He hoisted himself over noiselessly. He had left the curtains half drawn across the sliding glass partition, and now he peered in cautiously. They were just the way he wanted them. Ass, too. For 4 soldiers and 1 copter had been left to guard the footlocker. The rest would be outside the bathroom door with the rocket launcher. Okay, in through the opening like gangbusters. Wipe out the ones like by the footlocker, then out the door. Then a quick taxi to the airport. Off to Miami to find Morris's #1 idea girl. He thought he might just burn her face off with a flamethrower. That would be poetic justice. He took off his shirt and ripped a long strip from one sleeve. He dropped the rest to flutter limply by his feet and bit off the plastic spout of the can of lighter fluid. He stuffed one end of the rag inside, withdrew it, and stuffed the other end in so only a 6-inch strip of saturated cotton hung free. He got out his lighter, took a deep breath, and thumbed the wheel. He tipped it to the cloth, and as it sprang alight, he rammed open the glass partition and plunged through. The copter reacted instantly, kamikaze diving him uh, as he charged across the rug, dripping tiny splatters of liquid fire. Renshaw straight-armed it, hardly noticing the jolt of pain that ran up his arm as the turning blades chopped his flesh open. The tiny foot soldiers scattered into the footlocker. After that, it all happened very rapidly. Renshaw then threw the Renshaw threw the lighter fluid. The can caught, mushrooming into a licking fireball. The next instant he was reversing, running for the door. He never knew what hit him. It was like the thud that a steel safe would make when dropped from a respectable height. Only this thud ran through the entire high-rise apartment building, thrumming in its steel frame like a turning fork. The penthouse door blew off its hinges and shattered against the far wall. A couple who had been walking hand in hand below them looked up in time to see a very large white flash, as though 100 flash guns had gone off at once. Somebody blew a fuse, the man said. I guess, what's that? His girl asked. Something was fluttering lazily down toward them. Jesus, some guy's shirt, all full of little holes. Bloody, too. I don't like it, she said nervously. Call a cab, huh, Ralph? We'll have to talk to the cops if something happened up there, and I ain't supposed to be out with you. Sure, yeah. He looked around, saw a taxi, and whistled. Its brake lights flared, and they ran across to get it. Behind them, unseen, a tiny scrap of paper floated down and landed near the remains of John Renshaw's shirt. Spiky backhand script read, Hey, kids! Special in this Vietnam footlocker. For a limited time only. 1 rocket launcher. 20 surface-to-air twister missiles. 1 scale model thermonuclear weapon. Crazily enough, that is the end of that story. I will say, I feel like that was a bit rushed. I would say, out of all the stories here, this one felt a bit more rushed compared to the other stories we've read. Literally all the other stories that we've read so far. That's the only gripe I have with this story. But otherwise, it was very interesting, and it honestly gave me, of all things, Child's Play vibes, which is very interesting with me. Hello, Zelda Mysterious. How you doing tonight? I am about to go ahead and read the second story, but how are you doing tonight, Zelda? Excuse me. Alright. Well, alright. So I'll get back into the story. Into the next. We'll get back into the book. But we are reading the second of 2 stories that I will be doing for this this stream. Alright? I'm doing good. How about you? I'm doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. I will say, I'm a little bit bummed out about that first story because I didn't think it was that good. Like, it felt rushed, but otherwise I thought it was an okay story. Gave me, like, Child's Play vibes if it was more military toys and figurines and all that instead of a simple doll. You know what I mean? That's what it made me think of. But I would definitely say Child's Play is a better, a much better. Hell, even Toy Story is a much better story than that, and that's kind of saying something. But anyway, time for the second and final story of the stream, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to read at least two stories, but there is one book. There's going to be one story here in this book, but I will have to do it with with only one story because the story is that long for a short story. Honestly, it almost feels like a bit of a short novel in itself, really, if I'm being honest. But in any case, let's go ahead and get started with the story. Trucks. The guy's name was Snodgrass, and I could see him getting ready to do something crazy. His eyes had gotten bigger, showing a lot of the whites, like a dog getting ready to fight. The two kids who had come skidding into the parking lot in the old Fury were trying to talk to him, but his head was cocked as though he was hearing other voices. He had a tight little potbelly encased in a good suit that was getting a little shiny in the seat. He was a salesman and he kept his display bag close to him, like a pet dog that had gone to sleep. Try the radio again, the truck driver at the counter said. The short order cook shrugged and turned it on. He flipped it across, excuse me, he flipped it across the band and got nothing but static. You went too fast, the trucker protested. You might have missed something. Hell, the short order cook said. He was an elderly black man with a smile of gold, and he wasn't looking at the trucker. He was looking through the diner-length picture window at the parking lot. 7 or 8 heavy trucks were out there, engines rumbling and low, idling roars that sounded like the big cats purring. There were a couple of Macs, a Hemingway, and a 4 or 5 Rios. Trailer trucks, interstate haulers with a lot of license plates, and CB whip antennas on the back. The kid's Fury was lying on his roof at the end of the long, looping skid marks in the loose, crushed, crushed rock of the parking lot. It had been battered into senseless junk at the entrance. It had been battered into senseless junk. At the entrance to the truck stop's turnaround, there was a blasted Cadillac. Its owner stared out of the star-shattered windshield like a gutted fish. Horn-rimmed glasses hung from one ear. Halfway across the lot from it lay the body of a girl in a pink dress. She had jumped, but she had jumped from the caddy, but she saw I wasn't going to make it. She had hit running, but never had a chance. She was the worst, even though she was face down. There were flies around her in clouds. Across the road, an old Ford station wagon had been slammed through the guardrails. That had happened an hour ago. No one had been by since then. You couldn't see the turnpike from the window and the phone was out. You went too fast, the trucker was protesting. You oughta. That was when Saltgrass bolted. He turned the table over, getting up, smashing coffee cups and sending sugar in a wild spray. His eyes were wilder than ever, and his mouth hung loosely and he was blabbering. We gotta get out of here, we gotta get out of here, we gotta get out of here. The kid shouted and his girlfriend screamed. I was on I was on the stool closest to the door and I got a handful of his shirt, but he tore loose. It was cranked up all the way. He would have gone through a back vault door. He slammed out the door, and then he was sprinting across the gravel toward the drainage ditch on the left. Two of the trucks lunged after him, smokestacks blowing diesel exhaust dark brown against the sky, huge rear wheels machine gunning gravel up in sprays. He couldn't have been any more than 5 or 6 running steps from the edge of the flat parking lot when he turned back to look, fear scrawled on his face. His feet tangled each other and he faltered and almost fell down. He got his balance again, but it was too late. One of the trucks gave way and the other charged down, huge front grille glittering savagely in the sun. So- Snodgrass great, screamed, the sound high and thin, nearly lost under the Rio's heavy diesel roar. It didn't drag him under. As things turned out, it would have been better if it had. Instead, it drove him up and out, the way a punter kicks a football. For a moment he was silhouetted against the hot afternoon sky like a crippled scarecrow, and then he was gone into the drainage ditch. The big truck's brakes hissed like dragon's breath. Its front wheels locked, digging grooves into the gravel skin of the lot, and it stopped inches from jackknifing in. The bastard. The girl in the booth screamed. Both hands were clamped into her cheeks, dragging the flesh down, turning it into a witch's mask. Glass broke. I turned my head and saw that the trucker had squeezed his glass hard enough to break it. I don't think he knew it yet. Milk and a few drops of blood fell onto the counter. The black counterman was frozen by the radio, a dishcloth in hand, looking amazed. His teeth glittered. For a moment there was no sound but the buzzing west clocks and the rumbling of the Rio's engine as it returned to its fellows. Then the girl began to cry and it was all right, or at least better. My own car was around the side, also battered to junk. It was a 1971 Camaro, and I had still been paying on it, but I didn't suppose that mattered now. There was no one in the trucks. The sun glittered and flashed on empty cabs. The wheels turned themselves. You couldn't think about it too much. You'd go insane if you thought about it too much. Like Snodgrass. 2 hours passed. The sun began to go down. Outside, the trucks patrolled in slow circles and figure eights. Their parking lights and running lights had come on. I walked the length of the counter twice to get the kinks out of my legs, and then sat in a booth by the long front door window. It was a standard truck stop, close to the major thruway, a complete service facility out back, gas and diesel fuel both. The truckers came here for coffee and pie. Mister? The voice was hesitant. I looked around. It was the two kids from the Fury. The boy looked about 19. He had long hair and a beard that was just starting to take hold. His girl looked younger. Yeah? What happened to you? I shrugged. I was coming up the interstate to Pelson, I said. A truck came up behind me. I could see it in the mirror, a long way off, really highballing. You could hear it a mile down the road. It whipped out around a Volkswagen Beetle and just snapped it off the road with the whiplash of the trailer. The way you'd snap a ball of paper off a table with your finger. I thought the truck would go too. No driver could have held it with the trailer whipping that way. But it didn't go. The VW flopped over 6 or 7 times and exploded, and the truck got the next one coming up the same way. It was coming up on me and I took the exit ramp in a hurry. I laughed, but my heart wasn't in it. Right into a truck stop of all places. From the frying pan into the fire. The girl swallowed. We saw a greyhound going north in the southbound lane. It was plowing through cars. It exploded and burned, but before it did, slaughter. A greyhound bus. That was something new. And bad. Outside, all the headlights suddenly popped on in unison, bathing the lot in an eerie, depthless glare. Growling, they cruised back and forth. The headlights seemed to give them eyes, and in the growing gloom, the dark trailer boxes looked like the hunched, squared-off shoulders of prehistoric giants. The counterman said, "Is it safe to turn on the lights?" "Do it," I said, "and find out." He flipped the switches and a series of fly-specked globes overhead came on. At the same time, a neon sign out front started into life. Conan's truck stop and diner. Good eats. Nothing happened. The trucks continued their patrol. "I can't understand it," the trucker said. He had gotten down from his stool and was walking around, his hand wrapped in a red engineer's bandana. "I ain't had no problems with my rig. She's a good old girl. I pulled in here a little past one for a spaghetti dinner, and this happens." He waved his arms and the bandana flapped. "My own rig's out there right now, the one with the weak left tail light. Been driving her for 6 years. But if I stepped out that door, just starting. It's just starting," the counterman said. His eyes were hooded in obsidian. "It must be bad if that radio's gone. It's just starting." The girl had drained as pale as milk. "Never mind that. Never mind that," I said to the counterman. "Not yet." What would do it?" The trucker was worrying. "Electrical storms in the atmosphere? Nuclear testing? What?" "Maybe they're mad," I said. Around 7 o'clock, I walked over to the counterman. "How are we fixed here? I mean, if we have to stay a while." His brow wrinkled. "Not so bad. Yesterday's was delivery day. We got 200, 300 hamburger patties, canned fruit and vegetables, dry cereal, eggs. No more milk than what's in the cooler, but the water's from the well. If we had to, the five of us could get it been on for a month or more." The trucker came over and blinked at us. "I'm dead out of cigarettes. Now that cigarette machine." "It ain't my machine," the counterman said. "No, sir." The trucker had a steel pinch bar he'd gotten in the supply room out back. He went to work on the machine. The kid went down to where the jukebox glittered and flashed and plugged in a quarter. John Fogarty began to sing about being born on the bayou. I sat down and looked out the window. I saw something I didn't like right away. A Chevrolet pickup had joined the patrol, like a Shetland pony amid percherons. I watched it until it rolled impartially over the body of the girl from the caddy, and then I looked away. "We made them!" the girl cried out with a sudden wretchedness. "They can't!" Her boyfriend told her to hush. The trucker got the cigarette machine open and helped himself to 6 or 8 packs of Viceroys. He put them in different pockets and then ripped one pack open. From the intent expression on his face, I wasn't sure if he was going to smoke them or eat them up. Another record came on the juke. It was 8 o'clock. At 8:30, the power went off. When the lights went, the girl screamed. A cry that stopped suddenly, as if her boyfriend had put his hand over her mouth. The jukebox died with a deepening, unwinding sound. "What the Christ?" the trucker said. "Counterman!" I called. "You got any candles?" "I think so." "Wait. Yeah, here's a few." I got up and took them. We lit them and started placing them around. "Be careful," I said. "If we burn the place down, there's the devil to pay." He chuckled morosely. "You know it." When we were done placing the candles, the kid and his girl were huddled together, and the trucker was by the back door, watching 6 more heavy trucks weaving in and out between the concrete fuel islands. "This changes things, doesn't it?" I said. "Damn right, if the power's gone for good." "How bad?" "Hamburg will go over in 3 days. Rest of the meat and eggs will go by about as quick. The cans will be okay, and the dry stuff, but that ain't the worst. We ain't gonna have no water without the pump. How long? Without no water? A week. Fill every empty jug you've got. Fill them till you can't draw anything but air. Where are the toilets? There's good water in the tanks. The employees' restroom is in the back, but you have to go outside to get to the ladies and gents. Across to the service building? I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. No. On the side door and up a ways. Give me a couple of buckets. He found two galvanized pails. The kid strolled up. What are you doing? We have to get water. All we can get. Give me a bucket then. I handed him one. Jerry! Jerry! The girl cried. You! He looked at her and she didn't say anything else, but she picked up a napkin and began to tear at the corners. The trucker was smoking another cigarette and grinning at the floor. He didn't speak up. We walked over to the side door where I'd come in the afternoon and stood there for a second, watching the shadows wax and wane as the trucks went back and forth. Now, the kid said. His arm brushed mine and the muscles were jumping and humming like wires. If anyone bumped him, he'd go straight up to heaven. Relax, I said. He smiled a little. It was a sick smile, but better than none. Okay, we slipped out. The night air had cooled. Crickets chirped in the grass, and frogs thumped and croaked in the drainage ditch. Out here, the rumble of the trucks was louder, more menacing, the sound of beasts. From inside, it was a movie. Out here, it was real. You could get killed. We slid along the tiled outer wall. A slight overhang gave us some shadow. My Camaro was huddled against the cyclone fence across from us, and faint lights from the roadside sign glinted on broken metal and puddles of gas and oil. You take the ladies, I whispered. Fill your bucket from the toilet tank and wait. Steady diesel rumblings. It was tricky. You thought they were coming, but it was only echoes bouncing off this building's odd corners. It was only 20 feet, but it seemed much farther. He opened the ladies' room door and went in. I went past and then I was inside the gents. I could feel my muscles loosen and a breath whistled out of me. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, strained white face with dark eyes. I got the porcelain tank cover off and dumped the bucket full. I poured a little back to keep from sloshing and went to the door. Hey? Yeah, he breathed. You ready? Yeah. We went out again. We got maybe 6 steps before lights blared in our faces. It had been, it had crept up, big wheels barely turning on the gravel. It had been lying in wait, and now it leaped at us. Electric headlamps glowing in savage circles. The huge chrome grille seemed to snarl. The kid froze, his face stamped with horror. His eyes blinked, the pupils dilated down to pinpricks. I gave him a hard shove, spilling half his water. Go! The thunder of that diesel engine rose to a shriek. I reached over the kid's shoulder to yank the door open, but before I could, it was shoved from inside. Before I could, it was shoved from inside. The kid lunged in and I dodged after him. I looked after to see the truck, a big cab-over Peterbilt, kiss off the tiled outside wall, peeling away jagged hunks of tile. There was an ear-grinding squealing noise, like gigantic fingers scraping a blackboard. Then the right mudguard in the corners of the grill smashed into the still open door, sending glass in a crystal spray and snapping the door's steel gauge hinges like tissue paper. The door flew into the night like something out of a Dali painting, and the truck accelerated toward the front parking lot, its exhaust racketing like machine gun fire, and it had a disappointed, angry sound. The kid put his bucket down and collapsed into the girl's arms, shuddering. My heart was thudding heavily in my chest. My calves felt like water. And speaking of water, we had brought back and we brought back about a bucket and a quarter between us. It hardly seemed worth it. I want to block up that doorway, I said to the counterman. What will do the trick? Well, the trucker broke in. Why? One of those big trucks could get in a wheel in through here. It's not the big trucks I'm worried about. The trucker began hunting for a smoke. We got some sheets siding out in the supply room, the counterman said. Halls was going to put up a shed to store butane gas. We'll put 'em across and prop 'em with a couple of boots. It'll help, the trucker said. It took about an hour, and by the end we'd all gotten into the act, even the girl. It was fairly solid. Of course, fairly solid wasn't going to be good enough. Not if something was, not if something hit it in full speed. I think they all knew that. There still three booths ranged along the big glass picture window, and I sat down in one of them. The clock behind the counter had stopped at 8:32, but it felt like 10. Outside the trucks prowled and growled. Some left, hurrying off to unknown missions, and others came. There were three pickup trucks now, circling importantly amid their bigger brothers. I was starting to doze, and instead of counting sheep, I counted trucks. How many in the state? How many in America? Trailer trucks, pickup trucks, flatbeds, day haulers, three-quarter tons, army convoy trucks by the tens of thousands and buses. Nightmare vision of a city bus, two wheels in the gutter and two wheels on the pavement roaring along and plowing through screaming pedestrians like nine pins. I shook it off and fell into a light, troubled sleep. It must have been early morning when Snodgrass began to scream. A thin new moon had risen and was thinning icily through a high school bed of cloud. A new clattering note had been added, counterpointing the throaty, idling roar of the big rigs. I looked for it and saw a hay baler circling out by the darkened sign. The moonlight glanced off the sharp, turning spokes of its packer. The scream came again, unmistakably from the drainage ditch. Help me! What was that? It was the girl. In the shadows, her eyes were wide, and she looked horribly frightened. Nothing, I said. Help me! He's alive, she whispered. Oh, God, alive! I didn't have to see him. I could imagine it all too well. Snodgrass lying half in and half out of the drainage ditch, back and back and legs broken, carefully pressed, soup caked, and with mud, white gasping face turned up the indifferent moon. I don't hear anything, I said. Do you? She looked at me. How can you? How? Now, if you wake him up, I said, jerking a thumb at the kid, he might hear something. He might go out there. Would you like that? Her face began to twitch and pull as if snitched by invisible needles. Nothing, she whispered. Nothing out there. She went back to her boyfriend and pressed her head against his chest. His arms came up around her in his sleep. No one else woke up. Snodgrass cried and wept and screamed for a long time. And then he stopped. Dawn. Another truck had arrived, this one a flatbed with a giant rack for hauling cars. It was joined by a bulldozer. That scared me. The trucker came over and twitched my arm. Come on back, he whispered excitedly. The others were still sleeping. Come look at this. I followed him back to the supply room. About 10 trucks were patrolling out there. At first I didn't see anything new. See? He said and pointed. Right there. Then I saw. One of the pickups was stopped dead. It was sitting there like a lump, all of the menace gone out of it. Out of gas? That's right, buddy. And they can't pump their own. We got it locked. All we have to do is wait. He smiled and fumbled for a cigarette. It was about 9 o'clock and I was eating a piece of yesterday's pie for breakfast when the air horn began. Long, rolling blast that rattled your skull. We went over to the windows and looked out. The truck was sitting still, idling. One trailer truck, a huge Reno with a red cab, had pulled up almost to the narrow verge of grass between the restaurant and the parking lot. At this distance, the square grill was huge and murderous. The tires would stand to a man's chest cavity. The horn began to blare again. Hard, hungry blasts that traveled off in sight, flat lines and echoed back. There was a pattern, shorts and longs in some kind of rhythm. That's Morse! The kid, Jerry suddenly exclaimed. The trucker looked at him. How would you know? The kid went a little red. I learned it in the Boy Scouts. You? The trucker said. You? Wow. He shook his head. Never mind, I said. Do you remember enough to... Sure. Let me listen. Jesus. Holy that background noise was loud. Jeez. Good golly, that was loud. Alright. Never mind. Sure. Let me listen. Got a pencil? The counterman gave him one and the kid began to write letters on a napkin. After a while he stopped. It's just saying attention over and over again. Wait. We waited. The air horn beat its longs and shorts into the still morning air. Then the pattern changed, and the kid started to write again. We hung over his shoulders and watched the message form. Someone must pump fuel. Someone will not be harmed. All fuel must be pumped. This shall be done now. Now someone will pump fuel. The air blast kept up, but the kid stopped writing. It's just repeating attention again, he said. The truck repeated its message again and again. I didn't like the look of the words printed on the napkin in block style. They looked machine-like, ruthless. There would be no compromise with those words. You did or you didn't. Well, the kid said, what do we do? Nothing, the trucker said. Nothing, the trucker said. His face was excited and working. All we have to do is wait. They must all be low on fuel. One of the little ones out back was already stopped. All we have to do... The air horn stopped. The truck backed up and joined its fellows. They waited in a semicircle, headlights pointed in toward us. There's a bulldozer out there, I said. Jerry looked at me. You think they'll rip the place down? Yes. He looked at the counterman. They couldn't do that, could they? The counterman shrugged. We ought to vote, the trucker said. No blackmail, damn it. All we gotta do is wait. He had repeated it 3 times now, like a charm. Okay, I said. Vote. Wait, the trucker said immediately. I think we ought to fuel them, I said. We could wait for a better chance to get away. Counterman? Stay in here, he said. You want to be their slaves? That's what it'll come to. You want to spend the rest of your life changing oil filters every time one of those things blasts its horn? Not me. He looked darkly out the window. Let him starve. I looked at the kid and the girl. I think he's right, he said. That's the only way to stop them. If someone was going to rescue us, they would have. God knows what's going on in other places. And the girl, with snodgrass in her eyes, nodded and stepped closer to him. That's it, then, I said. I went over to the cigarette machine and got a pack without looking at the brand. I'd stopped smoking a year ago, but this seemed like a good time to start again. The smoke rasped harsh in my lungs. 20 minutes crawled by. The trucks out front waited. In fact, they were lining up at the pumps. I think it was all a bluff, the trucker said. Just then there was a louder, harsher, choppier note. The sound of an engine revving up and falling off, then revving up again. The bulldozer. It glittered like a yellow jacket in the sun, a caterpillar with clattering steel treads. Black smoke belched from its short stack as it wheeled around to face us. It's going to charge, the trucker said. There was a look of utter surprise on his face. It's going to charge! Get back, I said. Behind the counter. Excuse me. The bulldozer was still revving. Gear shift levers moved themselves. Heat shimmer hung over its smoking stack. Suddenly, the dozer blade lifted, a heavy steel curve clotted with dried dirt. Then, with a screaming howl of power, it roared straight at us. The counter! I gave the trucker a shove, and that started them. There was a small concrete verge between the parking lot and the grass. The dozer charged over it, blade lifting for a moment, and then it rammed the front wall head on. Glass exploded inward with a heavy, coughing roar, and the wood frame crashed into splinters. One of the overhead light globes fell, splashing more glass. Crockery fell from the shelves. The girl was screaming, but the sound was almost lost beneath the steady pounding roar of the cat's engine. It reversed, clanked across the chewed strip of lawn, and lunged forward again, sending the remaining boots crashing and spinning. The pie case fell off the counter, sending pie wedges skidding across the floor. The counterman was crouching with his eyes shut, and the kid was holding his girl. The trucker was wall-eyed with fear. Gotta stop it, he gibbered. Then we'll do it. We'll do anything. A little late, isn't it? The cat reversed and got ready for another charge. New Nixon, its blade glittered and heliographed in the sun. It lurched forward with a bellowing roar, and this time it took down the main support to the left of what had been the window. The section of the roof fell in with a grinding crash. Plaster dust billowed up. The dozer pulled free. Beyond it I could see the group of trucks, waiting. I grabbed the counterman. Where are the oil drums? The cooks, hold on a second. Alright, sorry about that. Family member. Had to talk with them. Anyway, let's see here. Where were we? Hmm. I'll read that first paragraph of that. Yeah, I'll read that first at the end, just in case. The cat reversed and got ready for another charge. New nicks in its blade glittered and heliographed in the sun. It lurched forward with a bellowing roar, and this time it took down the main support to the left of what had been the window. The section of the roof fell in with a grinding crash. Plaster dust billowed up. The dozer pulled free. Beyond it, I could see the group of trucks, waiting. I grabbed the counterman. Where are the oil drums? The cook stoves ran on butane gas, but I had seen vents for a warm air furnace. Back in the storage room, he said. I grabbed the kid. Come on. We got up and ran into the storage room. The bulldozer hit again and the building trembled. Two or three more hits and it would be able to come right up to the counter for a cup of coffee. There were two large 50-gallon drums with feeds to the furnace and turn spigots. There was a carton of empty ketchup bottles near the back door. Get those, Jerry. While he did, I pulled off my shirt and to rag, yanked it to rags. The dozer hit again and again, and each hit was accompanied by the sound of more breakage. I filled four of the ketchup bottles from the spigots, and he stuffed rags into them. You play football? I asked him. In high school. Okay. Pretend you're going in from the 5. We went out into the restaurant. The whole front wall was open to the sky. Sprays of glass glittered like diamonds. One heavy beam had fallen diagonally across the opening. The dozer was backing up to take it out, and I thought that this time it would be coming, ripping through the stools, and then demolishing the counter itself. We knelt down and thrust the bottles out. Light them up, I said to the trucker. He got his matches out, but his hands were shaking too badly and he dropped them. The counterman picked them up, struck one, and the hunks of shirt blazed greasily alight. Quick, I said. We ran, the kid a little in the lead. Glass crunched and gritted underfoot. There was a hot, oily smell in the air. Everything was very loud, very bright. The dozer charged. The kid dodged out under the beams and stood silhouetted in front of that heavy tempered steel blade. I went out to the right. The kid's first throw fell short. His second hit the blade, and the flame splashed harmlessly. He tried to turn and then it was on him, a rolling juggernaut, 4 tons of steel. His hands flew up and then he was gone, chewed under. I button hooked around and lobbed one button into the open tab, and the second right into the works. They exploded together in a leaping shout of flame. For a moment the dozer's engine rose in an almost human squeal of rage and pain. It wheeled in a maddened half circle, ripping out the left corner of the diner, and rolled drunkenly toward the drainage ditch. The steel treads were streaked and dotted with gore, and where the kid had been there was something that looked like a crumpled towel. The dozer got almost to the ditch, flames boiling from under its cowling and from the cockpit, and then it exploded in a geyser. I stumbled backward and almost fell over a pile of rubble. There was a hot smell that wasn't just oil, it was burning hair. I was on fire. I grabbed a tablecloth, jammed it on my head, ran behind the counter, and plunged my head into the sink hard enough to crack it on the bottom. The girl was screaming Jerry's name over and over in a shrieking, insane litany. I turned around and saw the huge car carrier slowly rolling toward the defenseless front of the diner. The trucker screamed and broke for the side door. Don't! The counterman cried. Don't do that! But he was out and sprinting for the drainage ditch and the open field beyond. The truck must have been standing sentry just out of sight of that side door, a small panel job with Wong's Cash and Carry Laundry written on the side. It ran him down almost before you could see it happen. Then it was gone and only the trucker was left, twisted into the gravel. He had been knocked out of his shoes. The car carrier rolled slowly over the concrete verge, onto the grass, over the kid's remains, and stopped with its huge snout poking into the diner. Its air horn let out a sudden shattering honk, followed by another and another. Stop! The girl whimpered. Stop! Oh, stop, please! but the honks went on a long time. It took only a minute to pick up the pattern. It was the same as before. It wanted someone to feed it and the others. I'll go, I said. Are the pumps unlocked? The counterman nodded. He had aged 50 years. No! The girl screamed. She threw herself at me. You've got to stop them! Beat them! Burn them! Break them! Her voice wavered and broke into a harsh bray of grief and loss. The counterman held her. I went around the corner of the counter, picking my way through the rubble, and out through the supply room. My heart was thudding heavily when I stepped out into the warm sun. I wanted another cigarette, but you don't smoke around fuel islands. The trucks were still lined up. The laundry truck was crouched across the gravel from me like a hound dog, growling and rasping. A funny move and it would cream me. And the sun glittered on its blank windshield, and I shuddered. It was like looking into the face of an idiot. I switched the pump to on and pulled out the nozzle, unscrewed the first gas cap and began to pump fuel. It took me half an hour to pump the first tank dry, and then I moved on to the second island. I was alternating between gas and diesel. Trucks marched by endlessly. I was beginning to understand now. I was beginning to see. People were doing this all over the country or they were lying dead like the trucker, knocked out of their boots with heavy tread marks mashed across their guts. The second tank was dry and then I went to the third. The sun was like a hammer and my head was starting to ache with the fumes. There were blisters in the soft webbing between thumb and index finger, but they wouldn't know about that. They would know about leaky manifolds and bad gaskets and frozen universal joints, but not about blisters or sunstroke or the need to scream. They needed to know only one thing about their late masters, and they knew it. We bleed. The last tank was sucked dry and I threw the nozzle on the ground. Still there were more trucks lined up around the corner. I twisted my head to relieve a crick in my neck and stared. The line went out of the front parking lot and up the road and out of sight. Two and three lanes deep. It was like a nightmare of the Los Angeles freeway at rush hour. The horizon shimmered and danced with their exhaust. The air stank of carbonization. No, I said. Out of gas. All gone, fellas. And there was a heavier rumble, a bass note that shook the teeth. A huge silvery truck was pulling up. A tanker. Written on the side was, fill up with Phillips 66, the jetport fuel. A heavy hose dropped out of the rear. I went over, took it, flipped up the feeder plate on the first tank, and attached the hose. The truck began to pump. The stench of petroleum sank into me, the same stink that the dinosaurs must have died smelling as they went down into their tar pits. I filled the other two tanks and then went back to work. Consciousness twinkled away to a point where I lost track of time and trucks. I unscrewed, rammed the nozzle into the hole, pumped until the hot, heavy liquid splurted out, then replaced the cap. My blisters broke, trickling pus down to my wrists. My head was pounding like a rotted tooth, and my stomach rolled helplessly with the stench of hydrocarbons. Excuse me. I was going to faint. I was going to faint, and that would be the end of it. I would pump until I stopped, until I dropped. Then there were hands on my shoulders, the dark hands of the counterman. Go in, he said. Rest yourself. I'll take over till dark. Try to sleep. I handed him the pump.
But
I couldn't sleep. The girl is sleeping. She sprawled over in the corner with her head on a tablecloth and her face won't unknot itself even in sleep. It's the timeless, ageless face of the war hag. I'm going to get her up pretty quick. It's twilight and the countermen have been out there for 5 hours. Still they keep coming. I look out through the wrecked window and their headlights stretch for a mile or better, twinkling like yellow sapphires in the growing darkness. They must be hacked up all the way to the turnpike, maybe further. The girl will have to take her turn. I can show her how. She'll say she can't, but she will. She wants to live. You want to be their slaves? The counterman had said. That's what it'll come to. You want to spend the rest of your life changing oil filters every time one of those things blasts its horn? We could run, maybe. It would be easy to make the drainage ditch now, the way they are stacked up. Run through the fields, through the marshy places where trucks would bog down like mastodons and go back to the caves. Drawing pictures in charcoal. This is the moon god. This is a tree. This is a max semi overwhelming a hunter. Not even that. So much of the world is paved now. Even the playgrounds are paved. And for the fields and the marshes and deep woods there are tanks, half-tracks, flatbeds equipped with lasers, macers, heat-seeking radar, and little by little they make it into the world they want. I can see great convoys of trucks filling the Okefenokee swamped with sand, the bulldozers ripping through the national parks and wildlands, grading the earth flat, stamping it into one great flat plain, and then the hot top trucks arriving. But they're machines. No matter what's happened to them, what consciousness we've given them, they can't reproduce. In 50 or 60 years, they'll be rusting hulks with all menace gone out of them, moveless carcasses for free men to stop and spit at, to stone and spit at. And if I close my eyes, I can see the production lines in Detroit and Dearborn, and Youngstown and Mackinac, new trucks being put together by blue collars who no longer even punch a clock, but only drop and are replaced. The counterman is staggering a little now. He's an old bastard, too. I've got to wake the girl. Two planes are leaving silver contrails etched across the darkening eastern horizon. I wish I could believe there are people in them. This sounded so much. Yeah, I think I actually just found the story I was talking about earlier. But anyway, this story, Trucks, sounded a bit like a post-apocalyptic thing going on here. Personally, I think it delves once again into how human beings would feel like. Like, it goes into that terror of machines taking over. It's a very old concept of machinery and, technology that people have. They have that fear that technology could just take over itself and, you know, just take over and we would be left redundant pretty much. Personally, do honestly feel like I do honestly feel like that while I can see why people would think it would happen, especially when um there are vehicles out there that do drive themselves. You know, I don't know what you would call them, but the self-driving vehicles. Yeah, those are things. So I can understand where people would be coming from with that because you never know what could happen with them. But at the same time, I also doubt people would go so far as to try to make like a rogue AI program for any of the machines, so that way they don't in any way kill us. And this is actually twice now we've had a similar concept in this story. The first time was the Mangler. This is the second time, with the Mangler involving what was a what do you call it? Shoot, what do you call it? I know what it is. It's a conveyor, sort of like a convey, like a taper, like the that you put boxes through after everything that is supposed to be in the box is in the box, and you use the taper to, as you can obviously guess, tape the box shut. So that way nothing happens to it as far as the box is concerned. But yeah, so yeah, that's what this story delves into. And quite frankly, I like both stories equally. I think they both did their stories very well. Like it made it terrifying. But to be fair, trucks. I don't know which came first, this or Christine. But I could honestly see where either it was a Christine ripoff or this was probably where Stephen King had the idea of writing a novel about a car that that is very jealous of other people and only wants Arnie, the car owner, for herself. Very interesting story, but it's a little bit expensive for me to try to buy at the moment. Even the paperback is expensive to get on Amazon. But if the price is a bit more cheaper, I might be willing to get that book. But for now, I cannot do that. In any event, the next time I read Night Shift, I will be reading this next story by itself, titled "Sometimes They Come Back." This is literally a story that starts on page 223 all the way up to page 267. Yeah, that's like the size of a fucking Magic Treehouse book, if I'm being honest. But either way, I will be reading that story by itself the next time I read Night Shift. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this reading stream of Night Shift. Tomorrow night, I don't know when the next time I'll be going live with the reading stream, but I will be going back to Saito to take turns with these two books. And who knows if this actually isn't? I may actually ask for a poll on if you guys would like for me to do this two-book process that I'm doing, or if you would prefer I stick with just the one book, and that'd be that. Either way, that's just an idea that I had. Um, Tomorrow, I don't know what time. I don't know when I'll be here tomorrow because I'm going to assume I'll be doing something after I get off work tomorrow. With family, I don't know. I will have to think about that. But as far as I am concerned, if I am home enough to do anything, so here's the idea. So here's the plan. So tomorrow, if I'm home early enough, I will play another game and probably read Saito. But if not, I'll do a poll just to see what you guys would like for me to do in case I am not able to be home enough to where I could do two things at once. But because of how big it is, and how historic it is going to be, on the 5th, on November 5th, I will be, for the first time ever, live streaming my reaction to the election. This is a first time for me, and I know people are going to say, of course, you don't usually go political. But here's the thing. This is probably the most politically active I've ever been, and I really want to see how it goes, along with anybody that wants to watch it with me. Now, you don't have to watch it with me, but it doesn't hurt to say our thoughts on the election. But I will have to make a note and say be respectful in the comments or the live chat. Either way, be respectful. Because I hate sore winners and I hate sore losers equally. And disrespectful people. I hate all three of those things equally. But those are the ideas that I've thought of. They are subject to change. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for me here tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed this reading stream. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, this is Forrest Walpole signing off.